Hello and welcome to another episode of the Rowntree Gardens podcast. My name is Elias Rodriguez and I'll be your host. Today I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing Gene. Gene is a very humble and happy guy and talks about his life journey where he started in a very humble position and ultimately rose to another job that I don't think you could really ever have found the connection with. His journey is really fun and unique and is very honest and open about it, which I really enjoyed. So I think you'll really get a kick out of this interview. And without further ado, here is Gene. Thank you so much for joining me, Gene. Thank you for being here today.
Okay, I'm glad to be here.
All right. Well, Gene, have you ever heard of a podcast before?
A pod what?
Podcast.
No.
Well, that's kind of what we're doing today. It's a little bit like an interview. And basically, I just want to learn a little bit about your life and be able to tell it in kind of this unique way. Does that sound okay?
Fine, okay.
Okay. So we've talked before, and you had a very unique career.
Uh-huh.
Can you tell us a little bit about where you worked?
Well, really, I started when I was young as a cook in a Boy Scout camp. And I worked there till, I'd say about 1945, till I got fired.
And why did you get fired?
I got fired because we went out and got a bottle of wine and a bottle of rum. And the cook I used to work with, he used to hide Coca-Cola in the refrigerator.
Oh, my goodness.
And it tasted good, so I had some of that night. And I passed out on my way back to camp to go cook in the morning. So when they found out I didn't come up for breakfast, they said, the chief wants to see you up in the headquarters. Don't bother coming in the kitchen this morning.
Oh, man. Adios.
So I went up to see the chief up at headquarters, and I waited a few minutes and so on. Well, all of a sudden, the assistant chief came down and he says, "Hey, Gene, they don't want you to come up. It's just you got 15 minutes to get out of camp. And don't bother taking your stuff. We'll send it UPS."
No kidding.
So that was my first experience.
They sent your stuff UPS.
Yeah, and after I cooked for 3 years for the camp, between my 13 years, 14 and 15.
Man.
So after that, I went to work in the textile plant, which is the main thing where I was from, They had a plant where they hired 5,000 people.
Wow.
In the plant. So my dad was a pretty good textile man.
Where was this? Where?
I was in Manville, Rhode Island.
Okay.
So it was the biggest plant on the West Coast along the river, the Narragansett River, which they used to build them along the river because they used to generate their own electricity.
Wow.
Over the river. So that lasted about 3 years because the plant was going south.
Wow.
Textile was going south. It would be cheap and all that. So I worked there for 3 years, and when I got out of there, I looked around, couldn't get no real big jobs, no big enough in textile, so I joined the service. I joined it was the Army Air Corps, at that time. It wasn't just the Air Corps, it was Army Air Corps. So as I joined them, I went through my basic in Texas, and when they found out I had cooking experience, says, "Hey," "we won't need to send you to school."
No kidding, because you already did 3 years in the camp.
So they sent me up in New York and sent me to Maryland from there, Fort George E. Meade, while they were building a little. It was a small little base, for the Air Force.
Okay.
And by the time they built the kitchen, then they transferred me down to that plant that was right in Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And their outfit was to take care of the traffic of airplane over Washington, D.C. So I cooked there for 4 years since I was assigned in the military Air Force for 4 years. And as I cooked there, we had 200 men in our outfit. And we had 3 cooks, 3 shifts of cooks, And I was a chef, one crew, and the other 2 crew was
Wow.
one was colored cooks, and the other one was I think they were all they all came from the hills over there, Virginia and all that, So
Okay.
they were the rebels, I guess.
I see. Okay.
So we had my crew, the colored crew, and the rebels, So I cooked there, and I used you were treated one day and you're off too, So that's pretty good, So I had my good crew. I had 3 cooks under me working, and I was still a private, and they were sergeant.
No kidding.
Yeah, and so I just complained a lot, to try and get some ranks while doing it, because I used to teach these guys how to cook, and I was, and they had more ranks than
Wow.
me, So anyway, that went on, and they gave me a rank every so often, And also, I found out that since I had 2 days off, I had enough time to go to Rhode Island over the weekend, or the time that I had off in 2 days. But I wasn't supposed to go over no more than 250 miles, which was New York. But I just go clear to Providence,
my goodness, no kidding.
But that went on for a while, I'd be back on the morning shift and get my cook goings and all that,
That's great.
And,
No kidding.
Yeah. But I got to the point that I had the best crew, I had good cooks and all that. And every time they had a meal, everybody come to my meals. I had the biggest crew all the time, come and eat there, And the other shift, they had hardly anybody would eat their food. So I got.
So it gave you more work. Being better than the others gave you more work.
I got good name, to say that they're pretty good food when he's on, So, but and then I found out if I have somebody to pull my shift, when I was on, that I could have 5 days off instead of.
You're working the system.
So then I had 5 days. Every time I had 5 days off, I'd go home, and spend the weekend that way.
Oh my goodness, you worked the system. I love it.
Yeah, and that lasted long enough for me to find a girlfriend and get married.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So I got her to come and live with me in Virginia and for a while, but she didn't like it. We went back there, so. By the time I got out of the service, during the war, they had a point system where if you had so many points, you could get out of the service, And being, in an outfit that wasn't really on the
Front lines.
Yeah, so they found out I had enough points, 39 points, enough to get out. So they offered me early discharge. So sure, I'll take it. so I took a discharge and went back home. So when I went back home, well, again, back in the textile was gone. And I had found out at the plant that was there, burned down to the ground,
No
which was the
kidding.
biggest plant in New England.
Oh man.
Had all the fire department around Rhode Island over there trying to put it out, you know.
Oh, how
It burned
terrible.
down to the ground. So I had little jobs at different villages, you know, to weave, to work in the textile and all that. But it wasn't enough to support a family, you know, so I went to my officer of the military there, you know, to go to school. So I went to the electronics school, spent there 2 years. Then when I graduated, my wife finally taught me to move to California.
Wow.
So that was back in 1957.
So you went
And-
from here,
Huh?
you went from up here in Rhode Island all the way down to
Yeah.
California, huh?
Yeah.
The opposite side of the country.
Oh, and I hated California. I didn't want to go to California.
No kidding.
Yeah. So, but my wife finally convinced me, says, because she has a brother-in-law over here, and he had promised me a job when I get here. Okay, so I'll take it. So we drove all the way from Rhode Island to California, and I established my household here. And I found out when I got here, I didn't have a job.
Oh man.
So I started looking around for a job, and there's no textile plants or outfits here in California that did weaving and all that, you know. But I did find one in the paper. They had this guy in Hollywood had 2 of these looms, and he was weaving cloth to make neckties.
Oh wow.
So I told him that I was familiar with the type of loom he had and all that. So I worked for him for two weeks. Then I got a job in electronics over in San Fernando Valley. So I quit that guy with textile. I went to work for I think the name was Bendix over in North Hollywood. So I worked with him I almost bought a job, you know. I bought a job where you used to buy jobs in those days. I think one week of wages went to the company, and then you have a job. So I worked for them for 5 weeks. Then they laid me off. But
Oh,
you know,
man.
at least they knew they had some textile, some electronic shops that I could work at. So I couldn't find a job, so I went and looking for this outfit to fix a TV over in Canoga Park. And the guy gave me a job, and he had a lot of dogs. They called those outfits that they couldn't fix and all that. They was laying over on his benches there. And he had another guy working for him part-time to fix TV. But while I was working there, I fixed all the dogs he had.
I love that. So the name was Dogs. So anything that he had working on his bench that wasn't quite working, he called them Dogs?
They couldn't fix them, you know, so I fixed them all up.
No kidding.
Yeah. And the guy that was working there part-time says, "You don't want to work here all the time." Says, "I'll give you a job at Rockwell."
Rockwell?
Yeah.
The
So
aerospace
that was
company?
Rocketdyne at the time, you know. It was for the rocket engine, and next door was the Atomic International. So he worked at Rocketdyne. So he got me a job there. I started working with him, Rocketdyne. So I worked there for 3 years. And mostly, you know, was to check rocket engines and all that, the electronics they have in the rocket engine. They don't have that much, you know. So most was to check the brazing unit and all that. So after 3 years, I was getting more electronic work. So I knew they had Alternetics, which was in Downey, you know. So I applied for a job there, and they finally got me a job there working for Linux over on the Minuteman program.
Oh my goodness.
So I was jumping on better, always advance, get get
I
advanced.
love that you started as a cook
Yeah.
in the Boy Scouts,
Yeah,
and now you're working on rocket ships.
on rocket engine and mostly instrumentation and all that. So I worked there 3 years, and while I was there for 3 years, they had another company right next door working there that they call Space Division, and they work on space. And most all the guys that work at Ordnetics transferred to the Space Division because they had experience, and they wanted to open an electronic shop. So I applied for a job with them, and I got transferred to the Space Division. So that's where I started. The first program they had was the not the Minuteman, but the space station. So I worked on that, and that lasted about 3-4 years. Then the shuttle came in, and that was more. We built 6-7 shuttle at first, before they started exploding and all that. So we had 3 more shuttle left, and
do you mean the Apollo shuttles?
the Apollo was before the space shuttle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I worked on there till it faded out too for 3 years. Then I went to the space shuttle. They went.
Oh my goodness!
And they had a contract to build 15 of them, but they only built 6-7 of them, and one exploded in the air, one came apart coming back from space. So we only had so many flights to go.
I see.
And they kept the last 3 to make all the flights they couldn't make, because it was stationed in Florida, the main space shuttle outfit.
And what were the names of these space shuttles? Did they have names?
Yeah, they had. Each space shuttle had a name. They had the Endeavor, all these.
Did you work on the Endeavor?
I worked on all of them. I was in the.
No kidding.
I was in the instrumentation.
Wow.
At that time, So that's where I started having computers, and they had a main computer that controlled all the data and all that they had in Downey. And I had so much. It was the biggest computer on the West Coast. I think the next biggest computer was somewhere on the East Coast.
Wow.
And we had so many programs that I could, like a program where you add the instrument, a program where you can transfer it, put all the data, how accurate it is and all that, And the computer, we set up the computer where we would check it in, I would check it in and have information in the computer where to know when it went to the lab and when to the staging area and when did we ship it and all that.
Wow.
So we had 40,000 instruments in the computer. And it kept me broken because it kept me so busy that we would want changes all the time. Always try to advance them. And I had a computer from a sign in Seal Beach where the main computer was at, and he used to program all of these for me, and I had been busy 7 days a week,
Oh my goodness.
But
Gene, what a fascinating story. So you went to actually working on the shuttles, like the Endeavor, which is now here.
Oh yeah, I started first with the rocket engine, where we had the different name. It was the rocket engine, the Navajo and all that. They started in the small engine when they built then a big engine and went up to the space program when they put 5, to lift up the space, had enough power to raise up in
Into space.
The space,
Wow, how cool. That is so cool.
Yeah, son, there was always changing the program too, They used to have different, what do you call it? They had the main engines and all that, and then they had where they would take 3, 4, 5 engines just to get it off the ground. And then they have the 2 tanks where they have the propellant, and that was filled up with fuel. And those 2 tanks would fall off when they get to a certain time. Then it would take the main engine, then...
Oh, my goodness. So can I share a little bit of what you told me as well? You now don't even have a computer.
Yeah. Well, it was so surprising when I moved to aeronautics. That's when I started learning, I had some of the experience with instrumentation in Rocketdyne. So then I put that experience I had there to aeronautics, where I would receive. I had a staging area where I would receive the equipment, check it in, and where they would I send it to the lab, and it come back, then we'd ship it, So, but the instrumentation goes right up from one little meter, to a big console, where it takes all kind of readings, the amateurs in it, voltage, current, and all that.
So I think the thing that fascinates me is you're talking about all these instruments, all these electronics, all these computers, and now you don't even own one. You gave it away.
I know. They're all in space.
You gave away your computer, you said, right?
Yeah.
So how long have you not had a computer now?
No, I haven't had a computer, since I came here 4 years ago.
4 years.
Yeah.
When you were so, inundated with it, now
so
you're
involved. I had programming computer, and plus I used my computer to do my genealogy. I did some genealogy of my family back to the 1600.
No kidding.
Yeah, for 1600 when they came in from France to Canada, and from Canada to the United States.
Wow.
How
cool.
I traced all those people, from coming from France.
That's amazing. And so you mentioned you got a girlfriend and married her while you were still in the service. Did you have any children?
I have 3 children. I have 2 boys and a girl.
And were they all born and raised in California?
They're all over here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, what a fascinating story.
And all
Gene.
my family all stayed back in Rhode Island because there was a French colony.
Okay.
And they all stayed
over there, back home.
There. They had work, some didn't, and one was a milkman and different things,
Sure.
But I still have only one sister that's living. She's only 4 feet 11, and she's 96 years old now.
Okay, all right.
So
I think my favorite part is that you were working at a TV repair shop, and your next job from there was in rockets. Yeah. I think that's such a cool jump.
Oh yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Gene.
But still, I was always in instrumentation and the data, data work that would go into the computer,
sure.
And but we kept track of all the.
Very cool.
Space,
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Gene, and for telling us a little bit about your story. I think it's a fascinating one.
It's really fascinating. My life has been fascinating because I spent 35 years in there,
That's
and
amazing.
It was always a good job, I always from one division to the other division up to the.
Great.
And yet when I left, the company that I was working in Rockwell was sold out to Boeing. So now it belongs to Boeing. I get my check, my My retirement check from
From
Boeing.
Boeing. My goodness.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Gene. I really appreciate you being here. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Okay, thank you.
Take care.
Okay.